Perfect. So as Donna mentioned, my sister, Sarah, who's right next to my wife, and my other sister, she is the inspiration for why I have maybe a unique vision of what special needs planning should be. And she's been such an impact in my life. I'm certainly not the person that I am today without her in my life. And right now, Enable Special Needs Planning, because of the unique view that we work with families across the country. And so I'm excited to share with you what our view of planning is and help you get started in your own journey. And so, as I mentioned, my sister I'm 5 years older than Sarah, and she's impacted my life in so many amazing ways. And, I'm the person I am today because of her. I wouldn't be doing what I am doing now if it wasn't for her. But just like many of you realize, Sarah being an amazing part of our life made our life different, right? Not good, not bad. It was what it was. And so, like me, I'm sure that there are things about your life that are a little bit different. For example, for my family and for me and my friends growing up, when I was in grade school, there weren't many of my friends who were having kitchen table conversations with their parents about what the future of their sibling looked like. I was a very curious kid, and I asked a lot of questions. I wanted to know because I knew that there were probably additional considerations that we needed to have for Sarah's future, and I wanted to be part of those conversations. But those weren't normal, right? And throughout those conversations that I had growing up, I could see the emotions coming out in my parents. I could tell that at times they were overwhelmed, and they were frustrated, and they were confused about what to do. At times I saw that they were worried and sometimes afraid about Sarah's future. And oftentimes I felt like they were just stuck. And so early on, they got a local financial planner on their team to help them navigate through a lot of the decisions that they knew that they needed to. And they also got a local attorney to help them draft a special needs trust and do the legal protection components that they were told that they needed to do. And this was obviously way before I was doing what I'm doing in the industry that I'm currently in. And I can tell you, even though I didn't understand what was fully going on, I could tell that those emotions really didn't dissipate. Those emotions that they were feeling, of feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and confused, didn't change the conversations that we had. I still felt like they were stuck. And so I went to Purdue. I graduated and knew that I wanted to work with families that were much like ours, much like my own. And I took the path of going towards helping families having the conversations of planning for the future, because it was conversations that I knew through my family were so important. And after I graduated, I interviewed with multiple firms, each who said they did special needs planning, and ultimately picked the one that best fit my values and how I wanted to help families plan. And lucky or unlucky for my parents, they were the first guinea pigs. And through diving through their plan, that was my firm's way of showing me what special needs planning was. And to my shock, and to my parents' shock, and I think honestly, to the firm's shock, my parents' plan was completely wrong. There were so many details about their plan that weren't talked about, that were done completely wrong. A special needs trust wasn't drafted properly, and it really could have derailed the entire plan that they had put together. And so our team spent months helping them tear the plan apart and re-put it together that best fit what they were looking for. And so at that point, we were able to take what I had learned. I was able to start serving more families and having conversations with more families. And I started having conversations with our team. But as I did that, I realized two things. One, I realized that the conversations that we were having were the same exact conversations for every single family. It was a cookie cutter process. And everybody here tonight knows that our families certainly aren't cookie cutter. Each family has their unique goals and plans and challenges that really need to be addressed. But as Donna mentioned in the introduction, the biggest thing that I realized was that the conversations started and stopped with what happens when my parents pass away. That was it. I saw that that was all planning was. And I'm not discounting the fact that, yes, that's important because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We have to have a plan for the what ifs. But I also looked at this from a proud big brother standpoint. And I said, no, I believe that planning should be focused on allowing my sister, Sarah, allowing your loved ones to live out a happy and fulfilling and purposeful life today and every day in the future. And so that is my approach to planning. And that's what I want to walk through tonight and help you begin that process for your own family, but more importantly, for your child, your loved one. And so some discussion points that I'm excited to jump in, and this is going to be more just get you thinking and starting to go through this workbook that I sent along. But again, like I said, everything is going to be on the screen. When you hear the term special needs planning, what comes to mind? Are there certain emotions that come up? Are they positive? Are they negative? Maybe a combination? Do you think about the what ifs? What happens if you're not here? Or does your mind go to, I want to plan for abundant opportunities for your child? Does your mind go to special needs trusts and ABLE accounts? So where do you go to when you think of special needs planning? And then each of you, I'm sure, are in different parts of your planning journey. Maybe some of you tonight, this is the first time that you've sat down to really think through what a plan needs to be made of. And that's awesome. I'm glad you're here. Some of you, maybe you've implemented some strategies, but you know there's more that needs to be done to plan for an abundant future for your child. And then many of you maybe are proud of your progress. Maybe you've done everything that you need to do, and you're really here just for confirmation that, yes, in fact, what you've done is correct. But the biggest piece of that I want to understand and help you get to the place where we're starting tonight is, why are you here today? What are you hoping to learn? And I want to make sure each one of you walks away tonight with either the answers you're looking for or the guidance that you're looking for to say, now we know where to start. Now we have the answers that we're looking for. Let's begin this. And then lastly, what does peace of mind mean? That's a big question, right? Peace of mind means different things for different families, but ultimately I feel like that is what we are all searching for as we are planning for the future of our family and planning for the future of our loved ones. And so that peace of mind question, like I said, every single family is trying to achieve this that we work with. But I find that there are 4 challenges that each of us are facing as we are trying to plan and ultimately get peace of mind about the future. And these are challenges that every single family shares with us. At some point, they're feeling these challenges. So often we hear, I barely have enough time to plan for today. How would I ever think about planning for the future? And even if I did have time to plan, where do I start? A Google search oftentimes leads me down a rabbit hole of even being more confused than where I started. And then what's right for my family? As I mentioned, none of us are the same. Our families are so amazingly unique, and I believe that the plans should reflect that. So what are the right steps for your family? And then ultimately, how do we make sure it happens? We know that there's so many goals and so many things that we're trying to achieve for the family, and most importantly for our loved one, for their future. How do we make sure that we have enough money to pay and support that vision that we're trying to get? So are any of these challenges, do any of those resonate with you guys? We hear this all the time. And like I said, feel free to chime in if there's anything that you have questions for or you want to add. So to help families overcome those challenges, like I said, I've been doing this for almost 15 years, and our process has evolved over time to be more comprehensive and make it easier for families to plan. Our initial planning process is the foundational plan. And this is designed to help families overcome those challenges and battle those emotions that often stall families in their tracks. But it has three components. And this is exactly what we're going to be walking through tonight, as we're going to be expanding on these and helping you guys get started in each of these three areas.
Now we have a question, well, a hand raised from Mike. Mike,
Yes.
Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Oh, I was just agreeing. I should have put a thumbs up that I agree with. Yeah, there's a lot of things we have on our minds.
Wonderful.
We'll call that a high five then. How about that?
There we go. High five. Yeah, there is a lot to this. I understand the emotions, and we'll talk about those emotions in a little bit. And there's so many components to planning. And I understand through my family's experiences and conversations how overwhelming it is. I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you for sharing. So for tonight, what I want you guys to walk away with, I want you to have a clear understanding of why you're planning. Each of you have different reasons of why. And I want you to have your own family's vision of why you're planning. And that's so important. And we'll get to that in a second. Second is, I want you to understand the different components of special needs planning. In the back of your workbook, there's almost a glossary of key terminology, and we'll go over some of that tonight. But there are so many components to planning, and it can be confusing. It can be overwhelming. I want to make sure that you understand leaving tonight, what are those areas that you really need to understand? And then lastly, I want you to know what the next steps are for your family. Each of your next steps are probably a little bit different, but I want you to be able to take something from our conversation and say, this is what I've got to do next to be able to continue the process and progress that we see for our family. So the first step of our foundational planning process is our vision alignment step. Basically, this is helping you understand why you're planning in the first place. So for you guys, why did you take the time out of busy schedules to be here tonight? What are you hoping to accomplish through your planning journey? So when I talked about the emotions that I witnessed my parents going through, feeling overwhelmed, feeling frustrated, feeling confused, worried, sometimes afraid, ultimately feeling stuck, I imagine some of you nodded your heads in agreement with understanding some of those emotions, maybe all of those emotions. And I understand that because you guys aren't alone. My family went through those, and every single family that we serve feels that way. But I find that those emotions are what stall families in their tracks when it comes to planning. Those emotions are what delay families in their planning journey. And so if we are only here, or if we are only planning because Google has told us that we have to have a plan, or somebody else has told us that we have to have a plan, when those emotions arise and we start feeling those, planning is the first thing that gets put on the back burner. But when we have a clear vision in our head of what we're trying to accomplish, of what success for our loved ones looks like, and the impact that they can have on the world, when we have that burning desire to make sure that becomes a reality, when those emotions start creeping up, that vision is going to give us the ability to keep pushing through and keep saying, no, we are planning for a bigger reason, not just for the what ifs in life. And so this is why I believe that this vision alignment process of understanding and creating your why is one of the most important steps of your planning journey. And so every single family has different reason and different answers for this question of what does success look like? And I love having these conversations with families in person one-on-one, because even though every single family has different reasons of why they're planning, it always boils down to two things. One, they want success for their family. And number two, they want success for their child, who they're planning for. Obviously, that's why we're all here. And so for you guys, what does success look like to you? Maybe success has to do with time. Maybe you spend so much time and energy and so much worry and emotional energy on not knowing if your plan is right or not having a plan, that you just think, if I could just have the peace of mind of knowing that our family's future is secure and we have a foundation, I could spend that energy on doing other things that are going to impact the family. Maybe success for you guys has to do with money and not worrying about where money is going to come from for your child's future or for your family. But oftentimes, I love these conversations for these next two is maybe success for you has to do with purpose for the family, but also for your child. Because I believe that our loved ones have the amazing ability to impact the world in amazing ways. And so maybe it's finding and giving your child a vision of purpose for their life and giving them the way to impact others. So maybe indirectly, success in your planning journey is you're giving your child the ability to impact the lives of others. But I really want to encourage you guys to spend some time thinking through of why you're planning. What are those deeper reasons of why planning is important to you and how it would impact your family, but also how it would impact your child. And so again, we're going to be continuing to go through this worksheet right here. And so you can follow along or just answer these questions on the screen and think through these. And I'm going to ask for some participation if you guys don't mind on some of these. Again, having these conversations with your family, maybe friends, is so important. But why are you trying to plan? And what goals do you have for your loved one today? But also, what goals do you have for your loved one for his or her future? And planning, we'll talk about how it needs to be a bigger conversation than just your child, but what goals do you have for your family as well? And just like anything in life, anything worth achieving, there's going to be challenges along the way. And it's so important to identify what challenges those are. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's not knowing what to do. But what are those challenges that are stopping you from planning? And so, does anybody want to share? I would love to hear a couple of you sharing why you're trying to plan and what success looks like specifically for your child or loved one.
I'll share. I want to plan because my daughter is 17. She'll be turning 18. I didn't, somehow I didn't realize this was about financial planning, but that's a good thing. I really would like for her to be able to live on her own, either, you know, with assistance or just on her own, and be successful by her, pretty much by herself, to the best she can do possibly.
Sure. Is that a goal that she has for herself as well?
Oh, yes.
I love it. I love when the two goals and visions collide and everybody's on the same page. It's just the question of how to make that happen, right? In many different areas. You're right. The financial planning is a big part of it, but there's so many other areas that need to be thought through and able to make that become successful, right? I appreciate you sharing. Thank you so much.
I'll share.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
Dawn. I don't know if you can see me or not, because I don't see me. But we're getting older, and our family is our son and our daughter. Our daughter is a surgeon and has a very busy life to be fully responsible for someone with special needs. And so she doesn't have any family herself, and we don't have any extended family that would be able to even think about taking care of Alex. So I'm concerned, should we die before him? What happens? What's the best thing to plan for, or how do we plan for finding a place for him when we cannot do that?
Yeah, we hear those questions a lot of what's the best options, and family lives in different states, or there's not an obvious choice of who to pick. And I think that a lot of those conversations are more one-on-one questions, but of how do we think creatively outside the box, and how do we build that team around our loved one so that they're supported no matter what. And we'll get into some of those pieces when it comes to the legal planning that we'll get into in a little bit. But Don, I appreciate you sharing that. So one thing I do want to mention, planning what's important for you guys, it is about so many different things. One time I had a family, as I was asking them what success looked like, and they just started naming different things, just as you two did. And the list just went on and on. And I kept just saying, what else? What else? What else? Because it's important for our team to be able to help understand everything that they're trying to accomplish, so that we can piece together a plan that's unique to them. And the last time I said, what else? The wife put her head down, and I said, well, what are you thinking? And she goes, well, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but I want to plan for a boat. I said, a boat? And she goes, yeah. And she goes, it's kind of a silly thing. I go, well, tell me about that. Why is a boat important to you? And she said, well, I grew up on a boat. I grew up having a family who lived on a lake, and we had so much fun in the summer, and we made memories. And she just shared all about those experiences growing up. And she said, I want to be able to provide those experiences for my family. And so success and what we're trying to achieve doesn't necessarily have to be money. It doesn't necessarily have to be material things or that peace of mind. It can be having memories, creating the experiences for our family that we're trying to do. And so I want to encourage you guys to think big when it comes to what success looks like, as far as all the areas that would give you peace of mind and what success looks like. One last question for you guys that I don't need an answer from, but I see this a lot. Is it sometimes difficult to think about the future? Maybe you have younger kids, and it's difficult to think so far in the future because there's so many unknowns. Or maybe your loved ones are older, but it's still difficult because of those unknowns. And so I want to share a little story, a little more background on my family and how that relates to this. When my sister was born 33 years ago, my parents heard, I'm sorry. That was the first thing they heard from doctors when she was born. I'm sorry, your daughter has Down syndrome. And over the next few weeks and few months, various doctors and nurses and professionals, each one by one, gave them their limited expectations for Sarah's life. And my parents heard things like, your daughter won't be able to ride a bicycle. She won't be able to be in a mainstream classroom. She won't be able to live on her own. And that list just kept going. But one of the things that they heard was, most kids with Down syndrome usually don't learn to read. And you guys should expect the same. And fast forward to today, Sarah now works in a secondary classroom, where one of her many duties in that classroom is tutoring the kids on their reading abilities. One of the things that doctors said she would never be able to accomplish. And in this story that I just shared, seemingly everything happened so easily. But what I didn't tell you about was all the therapies that I remember going to when I was a young kid. All the time that I spent, I remember spending reading to her, helping her develop those initial abilities. I didn't tell you how much she absolutely hated school growing up. And that was such a challenge. She didn't want to go to school. She didn't want to be there. And she'd hide from her teachers and sneak out of her classroom all the time. And I can't tell you how many times I got pulled out of my classroom because they had lost Sarah again. And now thinking back on that and looking back, that's many years ago, I find that's pretty funny. She didn't want to be there and she was going to find a way to not be there. But I guarantee you at the time, my parents didn't find that was funny. And I wonder how many times they looked back at those early conversations with the doctors and thought, were they right? Will Sarah never be able to accomplish what we hope for her? And I can guarantee you that they never in a million years envisioned her to work in a classroom. She hated school growing up. And I tell you this because the future might be fuzzy. We might not know what we're planning for. And that's okay. You might not be able to think 3 years down the road. You might have to start 3 months into the future and figure out what are those goals that we're trying to do. And so the next piece of this workshop inside your workbook is writing down those goals. What are you trying to accomplish through your plan? And the first thing I have up here is, what are you trying to accomplish? Maybe it's together with you and your spouse that you have from a short-term standpoint. What is it that midterm, 1 to 5 years, you have a goal for? Maybe it's a new house. Maybe it's a business. Maybe it's anything, but what are you trying to accomplish? And then what's your goals for long-term? And then maybe you have other goals for your family that we need to make sure that you are looking through and making sure are working as well. Maybe there's college. Maybe there's grandkids, whatever that is. There's so many more considerations about planning that we need to at least discuss. And then for your child, what are those goals that you have for them? And I have 4 things listed out. As we just heard, independence is something that is so important to many families. What does independence look like for you and your child is very unique. But where is your child today in their level of independence? And where are we hoping to get to allow them to take that stair-step method of getting to where we want them to be? And most importantly, getting them to where they want to be. And so I want to encourage you, we're not going to pause and spend time filling this out like we would in a live workshop for sake of time, but I want to encourage you to take this part seriously, have a lot of conversations, especially that last part. For your child, where are they today versus where do you want them to be in a certain number of years or months? As you can see, I left that blank so that you guys could fill that out. And as you can see with this, through just looking at independence and social life and job or vocation, this vision of success that you have is always going to change. And so I want to encourage you, at least annually, update this list of seeing where your child is versus now what are the new goals that you have for their life. And also, I mentioned this earlier, encourage others who are close to your child, maybe siblings, extended family members, friends, maybe teachers, of where they see your child in the future. I think some of those abilities that other people see in your child would surprise you. And you might have a different perspective based on their perspective of what success for your child looks like. This really is a team effort of making sure that our loved ones have every opportunity for success. And then the next one is financial strategies. And for a lot of families, this is the first thing that they think of when they think of special needs planning. And so traditionally, special needs planning I found was very rigid, especially when it comes to the financial planning considerations. And so just a quick example of what I mean by that. Let's take a quick goal of, let's say we need $100,000, whether that's to put in a special needs trust or for a down payment for a home, whatever that might be. Well, we know that if we save, because math and money, if we save $600 a month and it's in an account that grows at 7% interest for 10 years, we will get pretty close to that. But how many things in your guys' life go accordingly for 10 years. I know not mine. And so a plan is not money. A plan is a spreadsheet that says if everything goes perfectly, here's what's going to happen. How do we adapt? And also a plan stacks goals on top of each other. And so in your guys' heads, you guys are thinking of the things that are important to you in the planning process. And so how many of those goals can you start allocating money to until you've run out of cash flow? So what do we start pulling off of those goals lists? So a traditional plan I have found doesn't work. We've got to have a model that uses a set of individualized rules and behaviors that are based on your individual family. It's got to be a system. It's got to be a process that looks at everything together instead of a stack of a spreadsheet. So a quick example of that is a family came into our office. We don't have many in-person meetings because number one, COVID, but also because we work with families across the country. But a family came in my office a few months ago who was local and was needing help with their plan. And we started digging into it, and their view of specialist planning was funding a trust. It was only focused on their child. And when I asked what they were currently doing, I heard, well, we hope to save $350 per month into this trust. And we're hoping that we can invest it so that we make 9% interest on that. And we hope that we can do that for 30 years. Do you guys hear a theme of what they were saying? I hope. Everything had to go perfectly for their plan to work out. And we see this a lot, that it's based on math and not a process. And so I'll get into more of what I mean in this in a little bit, but it's so important to understand that a plan versus a model, we've got to have something that adapts as life changes and ebbs and flows. And so the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to make sure that you guys are being as efficient as possible. How can you plan for everything? The first picture that you see right there is how most families I see in this country save money. There's so many holes in their plan where they're bleeding money without even knowing it, just by being inefficient in what they're doing. I'm not saying about spending money unwisely. It's just that everything is not as efficient as possible. And so we've got to be able to allow families to be able to save first and put money to work so that their child can live as independently as possible and have the funds to be able to do that. Or have a job coach that will get them their dream job that they always wanted, but we've got to have the financial ability to be able to do that. Whatever those goals are, we've got to make sure that the financial foundation is there. And one thing I want to spend time on, I have put, I think there's 3 different pages in your workbook on this alone. I haven't found a single family yet that we have served. When I ask this question, they have an answer for me. If you were gone tomorrow, do you know how much money your child would actually need to live the life that you envision for him or her? Counting government benefits, counting all these supports. If you don't know, this financial calculator that we have in this workbook will help you go through and list out all of the expenses that you'll need to consider and help you understand how much you would need to have. And so for this example right here, this hypothetical family said that they would need $1,200 a month in housing, $800 a month in transportation, $600 a month in personal expenses. And then we know that things deteriorate over time. TVs, iPads, things just need replaced, and that's $400. And so we're looking at a family who said that they would need $3,000 a month for their child to live the life that the family wanted for them. And so if we look at that, that is, the child is 15 years old, so we're going to need 60 years of that. So over that 60 years, we need $2.16 million of income. And I realized that number alone it's scary enough to make many of us say, yep, I can't do this. But that number is easier to get to than you might imagine. But I don't want to focus on that number, but that number is important, because if we don't intentionally plan for that number, we're not going to get there. And so we'll come back to that number in a second, but there's some key terminology that I want to make sure that we are talking about as it comes to financial planning, and that's government benefits. We've got to make sure that we have these government benefits for our child today, but especially if you guys aren't here in the future. We've got to make sure that those government supports are in place for our loved ones. And many of us here tonight we realize that if your child has more than $2,000 in his or her name, a lot of these government benefits go away, right? And so how do we do this? I just shared with you that in that hypothetical example, that family needed income totaling $2.1 million. But then I just told you that your child can only have $2,000 in his name or her name without losing government benefits. So what are our options here? And how do we get to that ability to have that foundation and have that financial support? So there's two ways. One is a special needs trust. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. I'm sure many of you have already got these in place. These have been around for years. And the second on your screen is an ABLE account. These are the ones that are a little more tricky because they're newer, I would say. And so how do you look through, incorporate these in your plans? I get questions all the time is, which one's better? Which one's right for my family? Do I need a special needs trust or an ABLE account? And so I want to walk through how I look at these to help you determine that. I'm sure there's many questions that you guys have on these two. So before we get into the details, I want to give you the 10,000-foot view of how I view both of these vehicles that are going to allow us to shield money from government benefits. A special needs trust, how I recommend our clients look at these, is more for long-term planning. Unless there's a large sum of money that needs to be shielded right now, we really look at special needs trusts as a estate planning vehicle to allow for money to pass from your generation, from your estate, into your child's name without qualifying or disqualifying them from these benefits. And then we look at ABLE accounts more for short to midterm usage. If there's birthday money coming in, if there's other money coming that we start creeping above 2,000, an ABLE account is a wonderful way to shield money from a short to midterm basis. And I'll show you why this is so important. And I can send, if anybody wants this slide, I can send this out to you guys, but this gives a good contrast and a good example of these two. And so from a cost standpoint, a special needs trust is a lot more expensive. We have to get an attorney involved. And anytime you get an attorney involved, there's going to be some additional costs in this. Where an ABLE account, they're so cheap. You can get one for as little as $25 set up in your account and you're on your way. Also from a time standpoint, a special needs trust takes a lot more time, and an ABLE account, if you're efficient online on the online forms, you can get them set up in as easy as 15, 20 minutes. One piece that's important to understand is taxes. Because this is a benefit that ABLE accounts have, because special needs trusts have pretty high tax rates. And it's something to consider as you are trying to plan of making sure that you're moving enough money into this account. You've got to account for the taxes when it goes into the account, but also when the gains come out, how are you taxed? And that's one thing that people don't take into consideration is these taxes. In contrast, the ABLE accounts grow tax deferred, meaning anything that's growing inside the ABLE accounts don't get taxed. And then anything that's a qualified expense comes out tax-free. So there's a lot of tax benefits when it comes to able accounts that special needs trusts do not have. And when I said a qualified expense, it's very vague how the IRS determines what a qualified expense is. Basically, if it is used for a disability related expense for your child, and you keep record and documentation of why it was used for your child, it will come out tax-free. Both of them, you can accumulate money in the accounts without sacrificing and losing government benefits. However, with able accounts, there's one number that you have to know, and that's $100,000. If your able account goes over $100,000, your child's SSI goes away. And so that is one main reason that an able account really has limitations when it comes to long-term planning. And that's why we have to look at both vehicles to be able to plan. Because if we're thinking about the lifetime of your child, $100,000 might not go very long. Let's jump down to number 6. Like I said, I can send you this slide if you would like me to. Number 6, the ease of accessing the different funds. Special needs trust, there's a lot of work that goes into getting the trustee to send money out. It's not as simple as going to the bank and taking money. Where an able account, a lot of able accounts have almost a debit card that you can swipe. And it's couldn't be more simple to use the money for your child. And number 7 is the last one we'll talk about, but it's one that a lot of families are frustrated with, and you might be frustrated with them too. I'm happy to answer questions at the end about these accounts. What happens to the money if and when your child were to pass away? And so for a special needs trust, you can name a beneficiary. So you can name a beneficiary of that trust to somebody in your family, and that the money will flow there if it's a third party special needs trust. Able accounts, however, there's a lot to be seen about whether this changes, because there are a lot of families who aren't happy about this. But if your child were to pass away, Medicaid technically could come back and get paid back for all their services. And so we can get in that discussion whether that's fair or not, but that's at this point, that's how the rules are set. And we just have to understand those rules so we can figure out what we want to do for your family. Like I said, I hope this was helpful. I'll send this out to you guys, but let me know what questions you have at the end if you do have any questions. So some more questions to think through as you guys are having these discussions with your family. What does financial peace of mind look like to you? And what would financial peace look like for your family? And then what obstacles are standing in your way of getting there? And this is another area that a lot of families are thinking when they think of special needs planning. They think of the legal considerations that they need to have to protect the plan that they are creating. So I'm sure many of you have sat down with an attorney, and I hope that conversation went well. And I hope he or she was able to help guide you with the special needs trusts or wills and estate planning documents. But think back to how that conversation was. So often families tell me that sitting down with an attorney for the first time is a little bit intimidating. And from what I hear, it's because they know that the attorney is going to ask them questions that they haven't had conversations on yet. Basically, they're going to ask you who is on your child's team. And you know that you're on the clock and you better get an answer really quick. And so one thing that we make sure that we do before you sit down with an attorney is we do what's called our legal prep meeting. We make sure that you understand exactly what your legal plan needs to be and who needs to be named on your team, so you know exactly how to go into that conversation with an attorney. So here's some more terminology that we need to be aware of. The executor, the power of attorney, are for more of your estate planning. But when we start thinking about guardian and guardianship for the future, and Donna mentioned this, how do we think creatively of how to name a first guardian if something were to happen to you? What are those conversations, and who are those people in your community, in your child's life, that we need to have conversations with and have conversations about to make sure that they fit the values and so many other lists of criteria that you would have to make sure they're a good guardian. I want to spend some time here on this trustee because I hear this a lot when I ask, who is going to be the trustee of your child's trust? A lot of times I hear an answer like, Uncle Bob is good with money. I think he's going to do it. And maybe he'd do a great job, but there's a lot of roles and responsibilities that the trustee has. And I want to make sure for families, and I want to make sure for you guys, you are thinking through that appropriately. And so to help you do that, I'll share with you the roles of the trustee. Number one, the trustee must manage and oversee the assets that you have left to your child and make sure that they are growing in a way that those assets will last your child's entire life. No pressure there, right? They have to file a tax return every year. They have to give an annual accounting of any money coming in, any money going out to the courts. They've got to work with the guardians to distribute those assets when the guardian says they need them. And they've also got to keep up, and this is one of the most important ones, keep up with the ever-changing government benefits laws. Because if a trustee distributes money to your child that isn't in accordance with government benefits, those benefits could be gone. And most of you know how tedious and difficult it is to get on the wait list for government benefits. It's probably not something that we want to leave to chance to Uncle Bob. And so does Uncle Bob make sense? He might. He might do a great job. But it's important for you to understand all of the roles that fall on that trustee's shoulder because it really can impact the future for your child. And so picking the right person or picking the right corporate trustee is very, very important. And also, I'll move through this a little quick, but I think this is very important to consider as you guys are thinking through and brainstorming who would be that person to be the next guardian. How do we communicate that ask? That's a tough question. That's a tough question for you guys to ask, but it's also a tough question to be asked for many people, especially if it's not a sibling. Maybe it's a friend. And so one way to make it easy to lower the barriers and lower the walls for somebody to say yes is to explain the plan. Because immediately when somebody is asked, would you be the guardian for my child if I was no longer here? The first thing they think of is, how is this going to impact my family? And most of the time, it's related to finances. And so if you can lay out and share with them that you have had a process where you have created this plan for your child, and in this special needs trust, there will be enough money to provide them living for the rest of their life, it makes that person's ability to say yes so much easier. I truly believe that there are so many people in your guys' lives who would say yes to loving and caring and providing opportunities for your loved ones. It's the financial questions that sometimes prevent people from saying yes. And so we're almost done here, and I'll open it up to questions, but these are the pieces that I believe are so important that you guys need to think through when it comes to planning. First and foremost, you got to have a vision of what success looks like. You got to start those planning conversations of why you're planning in the first place. And then you have to have a financial model that supports that vision, that allows it to happen. And then you've got to have a legal plan that protects that vision for what you're trying to do. The legal plan is also going to build the team for today, but most importantly, it's going to build the team around your child for their future. The guardians, the trustees, the trust protectors, the people who are going to look out for your child and make sure that they're provided for. And then lastly, we've got to make sure that we're coordinating and communicating that plan with your team and updating the plan as things change in your guys' life. So the picture on the left, how many of you guys know what that is? How many of you guys have one of those drawers in your home? I don't know about you guys in Alaska, but here in Indiana, we call that the junk drawer, where it's just the catch-all drawer. My house here, we might have two of them. But I find that a lot of families' financial pictures, we call it their financial junk drawers, because there's a lot of stuff. You guys have likely done so much. You might have done special needs trusts. You might have gotten your wills done. Maybe you have some life insurance. You have some retirement accounts, maybe long-term care insurance, brokerage accounts, credit cards, car insurance, all the things that make up your financial picture. Is it coordinated? Because one change in one area of that entire junk drawer impacts everything. It's like a ripple effect. And it impacts everything for your child's future and your ability to plan for their future. And so we've got to make sure not only are we aligned with a vision of what we're trying to accomplish, but we've got to make sure that that financial plan is coordinated so everything is working together. I use the analogy, the picture on the right of being in a rowboat. If we're in a rowboat and everybody's rowing in different directions, similar to how junk drawers are, we're not going to get anywhere. And so we've got to make sure that for your child's security, for their future, and to make all the other goals that you have work, you've got to make sure that we're being efficient. And so lastly, as I mentioned, I want to bring this home of why I believe financial planning, of this being efficient, is the most important part of the foundation steps of creating a solid foundation for your child. Is there's so many things to plan for, right? So it's great to have a vision, but you've got to have a way of making it happen. And so for rough numbers, I'll give you this example of a typical family. Income coming in is 100,000. Again, for number's sake, that's just a round number, but these percentages of how things are broken down, these are the breakdowns of what we see for a lot of families. For taxes, we see families paying around 40%. And you might say, well, we're not in the 40% bracket, but when you think of state and federal and oil tax, gas tax, cell phone tax, check your cell phone bill. There's taxes there that are hidden. Sales tax. You can see how quickly most families are paying around 40%. A lot of families are paying 30% just to service their debts. Could be good debt, could be bad debt, but it's still paying 30%. And then 25% is going to just paying for lifestyle. So for a lot of families, what's left? It's $5,000 that they're saving for. And so remember that picture that we were talking about earlier in the conversation, the buckets of money. Because so many families are paying themselves last after all of this, that $5,000, my job is not to say, well, you can't go out to eat as much. We've got to put you on a budget. You might choose to, but that's never our role that we play with families. We've got to find ways to make you more efficient so we can plug those holes so that we can start paying yourself first. I'll give you another example of why that's so important in real numbers, and then we'll wrap up for some questions. In the same example of a family being able to save $5,000 per year, if they were able to do that for 30 years at an 8% rate of return, this is where they would be at $435,000, which that's a chunk of money. If that's what we're leaving to your loved ones, that certainly is better than nothing, right? And that would give them certainly some security. But what happens if we look at this and help you become more efficient? And again, I don't want to change lifestyle. What if we can look at debt and look at the ways that you're paying debt and help plug some of those holes and find ways to help you pay down debt more efficiently? And we can save 5%. Well, that 5% savings put back into your plan we've just gained 318,000. Same thing for taxes. If we can find ways, instead of you paying 40% in taxes, what if we can make you more efficient and you can save just 5%? Well, at that point, we're $636,000 ahead. And all of the other insurance costs and all the things that we're doing that's inefficient potentially, if we can save another 5%, now all of a sudden we're at $1.3 million. Now all of a sudden, the ability to plan for your child and the abundance that we want to plan for just becomes so much easier. And so while special needs planning is so much more than just the financial planning piece, I believe that this is the piece and this is the vehicle that's going to allow your child and your family to achieve that level of success that you're looking for. And so we do financial planning, but there's so much more that we do. But this is so important, as you can tell, because that is going to give us the ability to plan for your child's great future.